The Utah Utes NIL resources will not take a major hit despite the $17 million deficit the university posted in the 24 fiscal year. We're going to tell you why on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and it's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Kyle Garrison, a writer who covered Utah all season long with the Daily Utah Chronicle. So senior at the U. Kyle, appreciate you stopping by. You've done a great job all year. And unfortunately, we don't get to talk ball right away because we have to talk about the business side of ball that has become so dominant in college football, and that's NIL. And I think one of my first reactions when reading the story that Josh Furlong did a great job at KSL.com, you can check out, head over there and read it today, was talking about the Utah Utes. And they posted, the university, the athletic department posted a $17 million deficit for the 24 fiscal year. So Utah, when they're losing that much money and you're trying to compete for recruits, I think the questions are fair to arise like, hey, is this going to affect their NIL resources? But the answer to that is no. And it says it right here in the story, Kyle. The deficit, the university says, was covered by athletic reserves from the previous year. That is a statement from Utah in Josh Furlong's story. And we saw the major talent that Utah was still able to land in the portal. Even Tanuvas's dad said Utah offered enough to keep his son. So I do feel like Utah's NIL is still in a good place despite this financial deficit.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you look at the Crimson Collective, they're doing a great job of kind of supplementing that. And, you know, like you said, Tanuvasa, he obviously was, I'm sure, offered a decent amount of money to head down to BYU, and we were able to kind of match that. But clearly, obviously, there was other factors that went into his decision. But again, I don't think Utah fans have anything really to be too worried about. Utah is a big university. We have plenty of donors, plenty of funding. The Crimson Collective is doing its job. And I mean, you look at teams like it says in the article, you look at teams like Ohio State, they faced a $37 million deficit as well.
Say that again, Kyle. How much money was that?
$37 million.
That's insane.
That's a lot of money.
And their Jeremiah Smith's coming back. They're getting all the guys back there. And I think they're doing okay, right?
Exactly. I mean, they clearly last year, they built a very, very talented roster. In my opinion, was the best roster top to bottom in college football. And it wasn't even particularly close. No. And I mean, they ran through it all. They won the national championship, and that was off of a $20 million roster. And now they're looking at a $37 million deficit. The year after they won the or the year before they won the national championship. So, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. There was other schools that also faced big deficits as well. I mean, UCLA with a $51.8 million deficit, and their athletic program still is obviously not where it was a couple of years ago, but it's starting to build itself back up, especially being in the Big Ten, getting more recognition with that. So Utah's in a great place right now. And obviously we don't have a guy like Ryan Smith who's donating, millions and millions of dollars just himself. But we do have sporadically a bunch of different donors who are collectively able to match the money that teams like BYU or teams in the Big 12 have been able to bring in.
If Utah wasn't making comparable offers, as much as the Spencer Fanos, the Smith Snowden, like Landon Barton, like those guys love Utah. They are loyal to this university. But just like how a Devin Dampier last year was loyal to New Mexico, if you get an offer in there, and I don't know what the offer was he got from Utah, but obviously there were several schools making strong offers, hence Dampier's entry into the transfer portal, then Utah would lose more elite talent. Yes, they lost a couple. It's funny. I mean, they obviously lost Cameron Calhoun to Alabama. Alabama's in here too for a $28 million loss, as Josh Furlong did a good job reporting on that too. So, I mean, like I said, Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker, you keep Logan and Spencer Fano, Caleb Lowe, Smith Snow, later on, like all these guys still stayed. So clearly Utah's NIL is in a strong spot, and we already compared it. Ohio State, they did just fine when they were in a deficit too. And so much of this too, Furlong does a great job of talking about, hey, well, like, why did this happen? Well, the Pac-12 made a major mistake a couple years ago. So they overpaid Pac-12 members from the past, and then they had to get a settlement, and Utah wasn't able to get the same sum and had to give some back to. And then you also look at the fact of what happened with the whole Pac-12 divorce. Then you had a large sum of money being kept by Washington State and Oregon State as part of that too. So a lot of these factors were even out of Utah's control. And look, Utah still turned a profit in 22, 23, obviously not during the COVID year, but this is still a football program that turned a profit by itself. The university as a whole just didn't. So the football program is going to continue to make money. They actually brought in $79 million in revenue and had just over $52 million in expenses. The Utah football program did. So I think they're doing okay. And like you mentioned, Kyle, strong. The Crimson Collective is still strong. Is it one of the greatest collectives in college football? Like, no, they're not Texas Tech, who's as a top 5 and portal class somehow, but it is more than strong enough and helped Utah retool their roster despite some of their losses into the portal as well as to the NFL.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, a point that I kind of wanted to make too was there's nothing wrong with the way that Utah recruits. Okay. Like we've put players in the NFL based on development, coaching. So there's just no reason to panic. We know what we get from this coaching staff. They're going to mold their players regardless of who they have. And I don't think that's the case for a lot of these teams. I think a lot of teams are living and dying by NIL, and Utah's never going to fall under that category, which as a fan, that brings you so much comfort because you just know year in and year out, they're going to find ways to get guys in the best positions to succeed. And yeah, I mean, like you said, Crimson Collective, it's not Texas Tech. I mean, there's teams in the Big 12 who, weren't all that great this year, but they're still bringing in some of the best talent in the country. And we'll see how that bodes for them. You just don't know year by year. I mean, Michigan made an offer for one guy for $4.5 million next year. I mean, he hasn't even played a snap yet in collegiate football. You got to let your guys develop. You got to see what you have. You got to bring in culture builders, like guys like Smith Snowden. I know in the last episode or maybe 2 episodes ago, you and Elijah talked about Smith Snowden and how he came back instead of going to BYU. BYU could have offered him X amount of money. But again, like you said, he loves Utah. He knows the staff. He knows the program. He wants to be a part of the growth and kind of bringing it back to where it was a few years ago. And so that's something that you just can't buy. That's something that Utah is never going to have a problem with because of just how everybody looks at this program, how revered it is, and how much potential and that Kyle Whittingham has untapped with this group.
It's been amazing what Kyle Whittingham, the program he's built. Yes, down year last year, 8-4 the year before with all the injuries they had. Down year by Utah's standard, but in terms of what happened, them still winning 8 games and those 4 losses not being bad at all. Last year was the first truly down year for this program. And what did they do? They had an issue in their quarterback room and a couple other spots on offense, right? They've addressed that with coaching hires, and obviously that wouldn't have been made possible if Andy Ludwig didn't end up stepping down. The quarterback development just wasn't there, and things they needed to change. Ludwig stepped down, but that was the right move for Utah. You get Jason Beck in there now. But it wasn't always the case where Andy Ludwig was going to step down to retire. There was a time he was going to go be the coach at Notre Dame. And how crazy, the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame, and how crazy would college football be had he taken that job as the offensive coordinator and left Utah back in the offseason of 2023? How does Utah change? How does Notre Dame change? We're talking about it coming up on Locked On Utes next. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Game Time has you covered. Are you trying to get into the biggest event? And of course, that would be the Super Bowl. Attending the NFL playoff games is an incredible experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll just simply never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Picks. And it filters out the fluff, show you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, just being there. I use Game Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game. It couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible values on amazing seats. I could even preview my view from the seat before buying. How nice is that? You're going to make your selection. You're like, well, I hope these seats offer a good view. Game Time offers you a view from the seats. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gives me the complete peace of mind. Also, the on-time ticket delivery, their low price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Game Time has it all. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price is guaranteed with our great friends at Game Time. All right, Kyle, keeping this one rolling, got to talk about Notre Dame and how just fascinating to me how different college football could have been. And I do mean college football as well. Like Andy Ludwig staying at Utah had massive ripple effects across college football. So just back it up. What are we talking about? Back in 2023, Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, Tommy Reese, ended up leaving for Alabama as part of a trickle-down effect. You had Bill O'Brien leaving, and just there was a lot of things going on in Alabama at the time. So that trickle-down effect almost impacted Utah. Andy Ludwig was out at a hockey game with Marcus Freeman. Like they flew him out here. That's how serious this was. And I do believe I'm going to talk about why and what would have happened. But had Andy Ludwig left for Notre Dame, I do believe Utah's and Notre Dame's paths would have changed, Kyle.
Oh, totally. I mean, you bring in a guy like Andy Ludwig in 2023, especially with Marcus Freeman being such a young coach, he's kind of going to be looking for somebody to kind of show him the ropes, show him how to run an offense. And I mean, Ludwig, obviously, he has the pedigree. He did it here at Utah. He had some unbelievable offenses here at Utah, and obviously a big Power 5 program. Somebody like Notre Dame is going to try and come and poach him. I think if the buyout wouldn't have been so large for Notre Dame to buy out Ludwig's contract here at Utah, he would have been the offensive coordinator for Notre Dame. But again, because the buyout was so big, Utah clearly wanted to retain him. They clearly wanted to keep him. And funny enough, 2 years later, or a year and a half later, he ends up stepping down. And you look at it as a what could have been situation.
It's absolutely a what could have been situation. So we talked about the steps a little bit. He ends up staying. So what then happens with Notre Dame? Well, they hire their tight end coach or interim offensive coordinator, and he does fine. He goes off good year, and then they go off. He goes to be the head coach of choice. They need a new offensive coordinator again. Who do they end up with? Mike Denbrock. I do believe Andy Ludwig is a good offensive coordinator. For anyone who wants to dispute that, look at the last time he had good quarterback play. That was in 2022. This offense averaged 38 points per game. But I can also say this. He's not Mike Denbrock. Mike Denbrock helped Jaden Daniels win a Heisman, helped Brian Thomas, as well as Malik Neighbors. Like those guys are monsters in the NFL now. They got their best seasons under Mike Denbrock. Riley Leonard is a good college football quarterback. I think Mike Denbrock maximized him to the max. I do think this offensive line, everything. Mike Denbrock, I do believe, is a better offensive coordinator than Andy Ludwig was. So first, if we're just looking like, had Andy Ludwig gone to Notre Dame, I think they still would have been successful. They probably still even make the college football playoff this year, and maybe not even that, because if they had lost one more game, because they already had the NIU loss, that might not have happened. So to me, I don't think they make the national championship with Andy Ludwig. I said he does a good job still, but that's still another leap of, hey, he helped get this team to the playoffs. Like that's a massive win, but then beat the likes of a Penn State defense and things of that nature. Like I really like Andy Ludwig. He did good things at Utah. Beating the top of he didn't beat Penn State a couple years ago. Like even he had the exact opponent that we saw Denbrock be able to get over the hump again. So I don't feel like Notre Dame, so would have been good. Still would have been in the college football playoff to me, but I don't see them going all the way with Ludwig because I do think Denbrock is one of the best, if not the best offensive coordinator maybe in college football right now. Right, Kyle?
I mean, yeah, Ludwig's offense, it would have been really interesting to see how it would have adapted to playing against some different defenses. Clearly with the Pac-12, he kind of knew what he had year to year. And then you saw it this year in the Big 12. It was very different and he wasn't really able to adapt to it. So you just never know. College football is such a crazy landscape. You don't ever really know year to year. But if you look at a guy like Riley Leonard, he kind of has similarities to Cam Rising in a way. He's a bigger body. He's a very mobile quarterback. He excels in play action. And I feel like Andy Ludwig could have taken a guy like that and really kind of gotten to the core of him and maybe even made him a better player than he was this year. Obviously, Denbrock, we know what he can do. But I think that Riley Leonard and Andy Ludwig would have meshed very well. just with the play style that he has. And I think Notre Dame would have been a really good fit for Ludwig. Who knows what his career looks like today if he does take that job. But again, Mike Denbrock, I think personally, just he has that Midwest culture. He went to GVSU, which is where Brian Kelly originally coached. He's got the Brian Kelly connection. He's got the Midwest connection. He's coached at Notre Dame before. I think, the writing was in the stars with him. I think he was a perfect fit for that group. I don't think Andy Ludwig necessarily would have been bad, but like you said, do they make it to the national championship? I don't know. I think they were definitely a college football team, just with that college football playoff team, especially with that roster. But again, to get to the national championship, that's a whole different story.
It's a whole different story. It's incredibly tough. It also just takes the stars aligning the right way, like you mentioned, too, Kyle, and they did for Notre Dame. So for Utah, then, how does this change if Ludwig leaves in 23? I'd love to say that Utah's offense is amazing. It's awesome. They go on to win the Pac-12, and then they go on to win the Big 12 right away. But it's just simply not true. Because guess what? We can change the what if of Andy Ludwig. We can't change the what if of Cam Rising. And Cam Rising still gets hurt. Utah bets on Cam Rising both year. No matter what the new offensive coordinator that Utah would have hired wanted to do when Andy Ludwig left, they obviously still would have rode into Cam that year. They thought he was going to play. And then the year after, I just can't see like the new offensive coordinator be like, no, we're going to move on from Cam. Or even if he wanted to and be like, let's go in a different direction, Witt would have said, no, Cam's our guy. We've reached these two heights with him. Like, you just got to, this is how we're going to do things. And I still feel like we would have been very similar results. Now, could the offensive coordinator come in, been better at developing quarterbacks? Because that ended up being Andy Ludwig's weakness. He had a lot of success with Tyler Huntley, but Utah did not really develop quarterbacks very well with Ludwig. And obviously that ended up occurring where you have to thrust an Isaac Wilson in the starting lineup, and he is just not ready at all. So that became a bad situation. So no matter who the offensive coordinator hire was, I mentioned like things would have changed drastically if Ludwig was hired. They would have for Notre Dame, probably not for Utah. And even if there was better quarterback play, right, like this last year, they'd win a few more games, but I don't think even better quarterback play, you were never going to get to the level of a Cam Rising that we thought he could be. So I don't see Utah's past 2 years drastically changing if Ludwig was out of the equation earlier, Kyle.
No, I mean, I think what has it been? 6 different starting quarterbacks over the last 2 years, maybe even more than that. That's not a successful game plan for any offensive coordinator. You could have brought in the best offensive coordinator of the country. I don't see how you can continually have rotating quarterbacks. It changes personnel. It just changes so much. Every quarterback's different. We saw Isaac Wilson wasn't Cam Rising, but we wanted him to be, and that just didn't end up working. I mean, Andy Ludwig did not have a very productive year this year, but then again, if you look at the quarterback situation, and you just look at top to bottom this roster offensively, especially, it was never going to be a Big 12 championship, go to the college football playoff year. It's really, really tough to do that in general. And when you have a freshman 18-year-old quarterback starting, it's really, really tough. So obviously Andy Ludwig, from day one, had to figure out a way to get past the Cam Rising stage of Utah football. I'm sure they knew early on that he wasn't going to be available. Or actually, I take that back. Sorry, going into I think it was week 4. Sorry, I forgot Cam Rising. His injury history is just now so clouded in my brain.
I think it's clouded in everyone's brains, and we all get PTSD when we talk about Cam injuries. You're not alone, my friend.
Seriously. But anyways, I mean, thrusting Isaac Wilson in the starting lineup again, and then you've got guys like Luke Batari, and you guys got like Brandon Rose who are starting games. It just never really was that was never going to work out for Utah's offense. But then again, Andy Ludwig, like you said, could he have done a better job developing Isaac Wilson? Could he have done a better job getting a guy like Brandon Rose ready to go? Who knows? Again, it's college football. You never know. But I think that if you bring in a new offensive coordinator, if Andy Ludwig leaves to Notre Dame, you might be able to bring in a younger mind who is a little bit better at molding these talented players and these athletes. So again, who knows? But I like to think about hypotheticals. I think it's a really interesting hypothetical too, especially considering the success that Notre Dame had this year.
And hey, maybe if Utah just starts Luke Batari both years, maybe they go on a run, right? Since he ended up, he win their 2 final. Each of the last 2 years, they've won their final game they played with Batari. So maybe the Batari Ferrari would have just been the key to it all, right, Kyle?
Exactly.
You never know in this crazy world of college football. Honestly, it could have worked. I mean, heck, Brandon Rose, we learned, should have been the guy over Isaac. It sounds like Isaac was practicing better than Rose, so that's why he won it. But some guys are gamers, some aren't. That's the quarterback is the one position, right? Where like you can't get hit in practice. So it's you always know that in the back of your head, even when you're trying to simulate your live reps. And Rose is obviously better at that. And now with Rose, all the best at UMass, Kyle. Am I remembering that?
I think you're right there. Yep, I think you're right there.
I think so too. And then hey, Nate Johnson's back. So it just shows you how wild and crazy all the college football things have been. So yeah, 2 disappointing years in a row for Utah, and wild to think what could have been had Andy Ludwig gone to Notre Dame. One thing that was encouraging this year in the past few years, though, for Utah has been the production of the senior class. I mean, some of the most accomplished players in Utah history was what they did back in 21 and 22, winning those Pac-12 titles. One of the junior Tafuna, Karene Reid. I want to get to them in a moment. They've done well at the Senior Bowl this week, but have to absolutely start with the great news that just made my day. Seeing Money Parks have been added to the East-West Shrine Bowl roster. Game is currently in action right now, but just seeing Money get this opportunity. He's a guy who's just, if he could have gotten better quarterback play, he started to break out in that 22 playoff run. The championship game, just like a couple of the plays he made late in that season where you're like, okay, he could be a guy. Even this year, he ended nearly with 300 yards receiving, was nearly the third leading receiver on Utah's team, the second best receiver overall, had 414 yards back in 2022, was never able to match that. But the plays he made, the deep throw to Wilson, the deep throw to Bryson Barnes to open the 23 season, like their moments were there for Money Parks. Do I think Money Parks is going to get drafted this year? Probably not. Could I see him getting an opportunity and surprising people like a Devon Vele was able to do? I'll also say yes, because I don't think this passing game best represented Money's ability, and I think he's a guy who can play on Sundays.
Oh, totally. I mean, like you said, he didn't get the opportunity really to showcase his skill set in this offense. But if you're a scout, you look at him, his straight line speed is unbelievable. He showed it, like you said, against Florida. I mean, in the Pac-12 championship against USC, I think it was a 57-yard touchdown he had. That was, you could see those moments where you're like, okay, that guy could play on Sundays, 100%. And so I think scouts are always going to have him in the back of their mind, whether he gets drafted or not, who knows? But again, you can get picked up in free agency as a draft and still be a difference maker on a team. That's just how the NFL works. There's 53 people on a roster for a reason throughout the season. So I think that he will end up getting an opportunity just because of how quick he is and how fast he could get an opportunity on special teams. Who knows? He could return kicks. But I think that a guy like Money having this opportunity to go to a Shrine Bowl and have guys like Karene Reid, who get this opportunity in these senior bowls, in these just pre-draft, just kind of tune-ups. It's a great opportunity, and it's again a way to show these scouts that you have these skills against some of the best talent in the entire country.
Speaking of some of the best talent in the country, that's what Junior Tafuna and Karene Reid are facing off against at the Reese's Senior Bowl. And Kyle, I don't know about you, but nothing has brought a bigger smile to my face this week than every one-on-one Junior Tafuna clip that has popped up on my feed of him just wrecking an opposing offensive lineman. This is a guy who dealt with so many double teams while he was at Utah. Now he's getting a chance to show what he could do one-on-one. He's the guy who had over 4 sacks in his redshirt freshman year. Like, he can get after the quarterback, and now he's been able to do that. Just a great leader, the size, the strength. I do think he's absolutely a guy who will play on Sundays. I think he's made himself some money. He scored a combine invite, so congrats to Junior for that. I love that Junior's getting some shine. I do think he is a guy. I think he'll get drafted in the 6th round or before. I'd love to think he could go in the top 5 rounds, honestly. I'm a big fan of Tafuna's game. Karene Reid is Karene Reid. We know that he's a really solid. I think right now he's probably going to be the first Ute off the board. Maybe someone else could surprise us there, but both these guys are going to make themselves a lot of money. But Tafuna, just because of those one-on-one drills, Kyle, I've loved what I've seen from him all week long.
I mean, he's just overpowering interior lineman. You can just see he's stronger. His feet are quicker. And again, like you said, he's been able to get to the quarterback over the last couple of years pretty efficiently. And he's a guy that could easily see significant minutes on Sundays for any NFL team. Interior D linemen are really hard to come by, especially guys that are as athletic and are as agile as Tafuna. And again, I mean, he's showing why he can be a difference maker. And I don't see a reason why you couldn't see him kind of start moving up draft boards. And then you alluded on Karene Reid, again, another guy, such a high football IQ. can pretty much play just about anywhere. He's a Swiss Army knife. He's a little bit undersized, but you can see in the tape he makes up for that in so many other areas. And again, he's gonna move up draft boards, especially this week at the Senior Bowl. He's playing pretty impressive football right now.
He absolutely is. Utah is impressing, and they can continue their NFL pipeline in the 2025 NFL Draft. For more of that, you can keep your at Locked On Utes. But Kyle, we really appreciate you coming on. Tell everyone where they can follow you at and absorb more of your content.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, Kyle Garrison 2. I'm going to be covering lacrosse this year, Utah lacrosse, and also call-in games as well. So I'll link all the content there. And yeah.
You said Kyle Garrison 2? Was Kyle Garrison 1 taken?
Kyle Garrison 2 is just what I've used since I was a little kid, and it stuck.
There you go. Makes sense. Well, best of luck on the lacrosse call, and thank you again for stopping by. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That's going to do it for our show. We'll be back next week talking the latest in Utah football, Utah recruiting, Utes to the NFL Draft, all of it at Locked On Utes. We hope you have a great weekend, everyone.